Most people believe the world shapes them, that their confidence depends on their environment, that their motivation depends on circumstances, that their limits are set by what they were given. But that belief quietly hands away the very thing that makes us human, choice, because the world doesn't tell us what things mean. We tell ourselves what they mean. Two people can walk into the same room and walk out with completely different experiences. One sees opportunity, the other sees threat, one sees possibility, the other sees limitation. The room didn't change, the people did. What changed was not reality, but perception. Your mind is the lens through which you see everything, and lenses can be trained, adjusted, and strengthened. Yet most of us never learn this. We grow up reacting instead of interpreting. We accept our first thought as truth instead of questioning it. We confuse feelings with facts. And over time, we don't just see the world through our mind. We become trapped by it. The mind is incredibly efficient. It looks for patterns. It fills in gaps. It predicts outcomes to keep us safe. But safety and growth don't live in the same place. An untrained mind prioritizes certainty over progress. It would rather be comfortable than correct. It would rather repeat the familiar than explore the meaningful. So when faced with uncertainty, it doesn't ask what's possible here. It asks, how do I avoid discomfort? That's why new challenges feel overwhelming before they begin. That's why rejection feels personal instead of informative. That's why failure feels like an identity instead of an event, not because those things are actually dangerous, but because the mind labels them that way. Your mind decides whether a setback is a signal to stop or a signal to adapt. Your mind decides whether feedback is an attack or a gift. Your mind decides whether fear means don't do this or this matters. And once the mind decides, the body follows. We like to think our decisions are logical, but most of the time, logic shows up later to defend what the mind already chose emotionally. That's why people say, I'll try when I'm ready, when what they really mean is, I'm afraid of what this might reveal about me. The mind protects identity at all costs, even if that identity is limiting. If you believe you are not creative, your mind will filter out every piece of evidence that says otherwise. If you believe you are bad with money, your mind will find reasons to avoid learning. If you believe success is for other people, your mind will justify staying small. Not because those beliefs are true, but because the mind prefers consistency over truth. This is why changing behavior without changing thinking rarely lasts. You can force new habits for a while, but eventually the mind pulls you back to what feels familiar. Real change starts earlier than action. It starts with awareness. Awareness of the stories you tell yourself. Awareness of the assumptions you carry. Awareness of the lens through which you interpret events. When something goes wrong, do you immediately ask, what's wrong with me? Or do you ask, what can I learn from this? When things don't move fast enough, do you think I'm failing? Or do you think growth takes time? Those questions shape your emotional response. Your emotional response shapes your behavior. And your behavior, repeated over time, becomes your life. The mind is powerful not because it's always right, but because it's convincing, and that's why training it is not optional. Training the mind doesn't mean controlling every thought. It means choosing which thoughts deserve belief. It means learning to pause between stimulus and response. That pause is where freedom lives. In that pause, you get to decide what something means. In that pause, you get to lead instead of react. In that pause, you reclaim responsibility. Responsibility is often misunderstood. It's not about blame. It's about ownership. When you take ownership of how you see the world, you stop waiting for the world to change first. You stop saying, once things get easier, I'll show up differently. You start saying, I'll show up differently even when it's hard. This shift doesn't make life painless. It makes it purposeful. Pain doesn't disappear. Failure doesn't vanish. Uncertainty doesn't leave. But they lose their power to define you. Because when your mind is trained, difficulty becomes data. Criticism becomes clarity. Delay becomes part of the process. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this teaching me? That question alone changes everything. People who grow aren't luckier. They aren't fearless. They simply see the same events through a different lens. They see effort as an investment, not a sacrifice. They see discipline as self-respect, not restriction. They see consistency as identity, not obligation. And that lens wasn't given to them. It was built day by day, thought by thought, choice by choice. The world will always offer reasons to quit. It will always supply evidence for doubt. It will always reward short-term comfort. But your mind decides what you focus on, and what you focus on grows. If you focus on obstacles, you'll feel stuck. If you focus on progress, you'll feel momentum. If you focus on fear, you'll feel small. If you focus on purpose, you'll feel strong. The events may be the same, the experience will not. That is why your mind is not just reacting to the world. It is actively creating your experience of it. And once you understand that, you stop asking for easier paths. You start building stronger minds. Because when the mind is trained, the world doesn't need to change first. You do, and that changes everything. We often assume that if something feels uncomfortable, something must be wrong. That if we feel resistance, it's a signal to stop. That if fear shows up, it means we're not ready. But that assumption is exactly how an untrained mind keeps us small, because the mind's first job is not growth. Its first job is protection. Long before ambition, before purpose, before dreams, the mind learned one priority: survive, avoid pain, seek certainty, stay with what's familiar. And in a world that once demanded physical survival, that instinct made sense. But today, the dangers are different. The threats are not lions or storms. They are uncertainty, judgment, failure, and discomfort. Yet the mind reacts to these modern challenges as if they are life-threatening. So when you consider changing careers, the mind says, what if you fail? When you think about speaking up, it whispers, what if they judge you? When you imagine committing fully, it warns, what if it doesn't work? Not because those outcomes are certain, but because the mind is wired to avoid risk, not pursue meaning. An untrained mind confuses discomfort with danger. It treats temporary pain as permanent threat, and so it defaults to the safest option available: inaction. This is why procrastination isn't laziness. It's fear disguised as logic. The mind produces very reasonable arguments for not starting. You need more time. You need more information. You need to be more prepared. And all of it sounds responsible. But preparation without action is just another form of avoidance. The untrained mind loves comfort because comfort is predictable. It knows what to expect. It knows how to operate there. Growth, on the other hand, is unfamiliar. It asks you to step into situations where outcomes are uncertain and ego is exposed. So the mind pushes back. It reminds you of past failures. It magnifies worst-case scenarios. It replays old mistakes as evidence. And if you don't question these messages, they become commands. We like to believe that courage comes first and action follows, but in reality, action comes first and courage follows. An untrained mind waits to feel ready. A trained mind understands that readiness is built through movement. Think about how often people say, I'm just not confident yet. What they really mean is, I haven't practiced facing discomfort. Confidence isn't a personality trait. It's a byproduct of repeated exposure to challenge. The mind doesn't learn safety by avoiding difficulty. It learns safety by surviving it. Every time you do something hard and live through it, the mind updates its map of what's possible. But if you avoid it, the mind never gets new data, so it keeps repeating the old story. The danger of an untrained mind is not that it lies, it's that it tells half-truths. Yes, you might fail. Yes, you might be judged. Yes, it might take longer than you expect. But the mind conveniently leaves out the other half. You might learn, you might grow, you might discover capabilities you didn't know you had. When fear is left unexamined, it feels like wisdom. When examined, it often reveals itself as habit. Habits of thinking formed in moments when staying safe mattered more than becoming capable. The problem is not fear itself. Fear is information. It tells you where something matters. But an untrained mind treats fear as a stop sign. A trained mind treats fear as a signal to pay attention. It asks, why does this feel important? What's at stake here? What kind of person do I become if I face this? These questions shift the conversation inside your head. Instead of negotiating with fear, you begin to lead it. Discipline plays a critical role here. Not discipline as punishment, but discipline as structure. Because structure creates certainty when outcomes are uncertain. When you commit to small, consistent actions, you remove the need for constant decision-making. You stop asking, do I feel like it today? You start asking, What does this moment require? The untrained mind is ruled by mood. The trained mind is guided by values. Mood changes. Values endure. On days when motivation disappears, values remain. On days when confidence is low, values still point forward. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Intensity relies on emotion. Consistency relies on identity. When you see yourself as someone who shows up, the mind stops arguing every step. It doesn't need to be convinced daily. It already knows who you are, but identity is built through evidence, and evidence comes from action. Each small act of discipline is a vote for a stronger identity. Each avoided challenge is a vote for the old one. The mind keeps score. Over time, the untrained mind becomes very good at rationalizing comfort. It celebrates rest that was never earned. It defends routines that no longer serve growth, and slowly, almost invisibly, potential erodes, not in dramatic failure, but in quiet stagnation. This is why people often wake up years later feeling unfulfilled, wondering where their ambition went. It didn't disappear, it was negotiated away, one comfortable choice at a time. Training the mind means reversing that pattern. It means noticing when the mind says, "This is too hard," and responding with, "Hard doesn't mean wrong." It means recognizing when the mind says, "This can wait," and asking, "What does delaying really cost me?" Because every delay teaches the mind that avoidance works. And what works gets repeated. A trained mind doesn't eliminate resistance. It expects it. It understands that resistance is the entry fee for growth. So instead of trying to remove discomfort, it learns to move with it. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but consistently. That consistency sends a powerful message to the mind. We can do hard things. And once the mind believes that, its warnings change tone. Fear becomes focus, doubt becomes curiosity, resistance becomes energy. The same mind that once tried to protect you from discomfort begins to support you through it. Not because the world got safer, but because you got stronger. And that is the difference between a mind that controls you and a mind you have trained to follow your lead. We love the idea of transformation, the breakthrough moment, the sudden shift, the day everything finally changes. But the truth lasting change rarely announces itself with drama. It arrives quietly, built through repetition, because the mind doesn't change through intensity. It changes through consistency. One powerful moment might inspire you, but it's the small, repeated choices that rewire how you think. And this is where most people misunderstand progress. They wait for motivation to show up like a signal. They wait to feel ready, confident, or energized. They wait for the right mood. But the mind doesn't respond to waiting. It responds to evidence. Evidence comes from what you do daily, not occasionally. An untrained mind treats daily practice as boring. It craves novelty. It wants quick results to justify effort, but growth doesn't negotiate on those terms. The mind learns patterns, and patterns are built through repetition. Think about how trust works in relationships. Trust isn't built through grand gestures once a year. It's built through small, reliable actions over time. Your mind works the same way. When you say you'll do something and you follow through, the mind takes note. When you say you'll start tomorrow and you don't, the mind takes note of that too. Every action teaches the mind what kind of person you are, not who you intend to be, who you consistently prove yourself to be. This is why discipline matters more than motivation. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls. It's influenced by sleep, stress, and circumstances. Discipline, on the other hand, is structural. It creates predictability when emotions are unpredictable. Daily mental training doesn't require hours. It requires intention. It's the choice to pause before reacting, the choice to challenge a limiting thought, the choice to reflect instead of distract. These moments seem insignificant in isolation, but over time, they compound. The mind starts to expect follow-through. It starts to rust your leadership, and trust changes the conversation inside your head. Instead of constant negotiation, there is alignment. Most people don't fail because they lack knowledge. They fail because they lack consistency. They know what to do. They've heard the advice. They've felt inspired, but inspiration without structure fades. The mind quickly returns to old defaults when there's no system to support change. That's why daily routines are powerful, not because routines are exciting, but because they remove friction. When something is scheduled, it doesn't rely on willpower. It simply gets done. A trained mind understands this. It doesn't depend on heroic self-control. It designs environments that make the right behavior easier. This is leadership applied inward. You don't wait for your team to feel like doing their job. You give them clarity, systems, and expectations. Your mind deserves the same. When you wake up each day with a clear process, you reduce internal chaos, you eliminate unnecessary decisions, you conserve energy for what actually matters. Decision fatigue is real. The more choices you make, the weaker your discipline becomes. That's why people make poor decisions late in the day. Daily mental training reduces this fatigue by turning effort into habit. Habits are powerful because they operate without negotiation. Once something becomes habitual, the mind no longer debates it. It accepts it as identity. This is where transformation actually happens. You stop trying to become someone new. You start acting like someone you already are. I'm the kind of person who reflects. I'm the kind of person who learns from mistakes. I'm the kind of person who shows up even when it's hard. These are not affirmations. They are conclusions drawn from behavior. The mind believes what it sees, and what it sees most clearly is what you do, and no one is watching. Daily training also changes how you handle setbacks. When effort is occasional, failure feels heavy. It feels like proof that you shouldn't try again. But when effort is consistent, failure becomes a data point. One moment in a long process. You don't overreact to a bad day when you know tomorrow you'll show up again. Consistency builds emotional resilience. It reminds you that one mistake doesn't define you. One delay doesn't erase progress. One setback doesn't mean you're off track. It means you're human. This perspective is only available to those who stay in the game long enough to see patterns. Short-term thinkers see only events. Long-term thinkers see trends. Daily mental training shifts you into long-term thinking. You stop asking, did this work today? You start asking, am I becoming more capable over time? That question changes patience. You're no longer in a rush to validate yourself. You're focused on building something sustainable. This also changes how you measure success. Success stops being about mood and starts being about alignment. Did you act in line with your values today? Did you keep the promise you made to yourself? Did you choose growth over comfort? Those become the metrics. And when those metrics are met consistently, confidence grows naturally. Not the loud kind of confidence, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything. The kind that doesn't panic under pressure. The kind that stays steady when outcomes are uncertain. This steadiness doesn't come from talent. It comes from trust. Trust in your ability to show up again tomorrow. The mind, once trained through daily practice, stops fearing inconsistency. It knows you won't abandon the process at the first sign of discomfort. And that knowledge changes how you face challenges. You take smarter risks. You recover faster. You don't spiral when things go wrong because your identity is no longer fragile. It's anchored in repetition. This is why daily mental training matters more than any single breakthrough. Breakthroughs are visible, consistency is invisible, but invisible work produces visible results. The strongest minds aren't built in moments of inspiration. They're built in moments of discipline, quiet moments, ordinary moments, uncelebrated moments. And over time, those moments stack until one day you realize something has changed. Not the world, not the circumstances. You have. And that change didn't happen all at once. It happened daily. We are obsessed with results, with visible wins, with proof that our effort matters. But the mind doesn't grow in leaps. It grows in layers. The reason most people feel stuck is that they look for evidence of progress in the wrong places. They want the world to reward them immediately, forgetting that the most powerful changes are often invisible at first. Your mind works the same way. The work you do internally doesn't always show outwardly. Thoughts shift slowly. Patterns rewire gradually. Beliefs take time to settle. Yet most of us give up before the change is complete. We expect motivation to last, confidence to appear, and fear to vanish overnight. It doesn't happen that way. The mind is not a machine that produces instant results. It's a garden, and gardens need daily care. Water the soil one day and you don't see a tree tomorrow. Pull a weed one afternoon and the roots are still underground. Sunlight nourishes slowly but steadily. Your mind functions the same way. When you train it, you are planting seeds. Each conscious choice, each deliberate thought, each moment you resist default patterns is a seed. Seeds don't scream for attention. They don't produce immediate fruit. They require patience. And yet, it's those seeds, sown consistently, that determine the shape of your future. The untrained mind underestimates this. It believes that change requires dramatic gestures, that motivation must be constant, that success is instant. This belief leads to disappointment, to frustration, to the illusion that growth isn't possible. But real transformation is cumulative. It is the result of repeated actions over time. Daily mental training is the engine behind that accumulation. You may not feel stronger today. You may not see results this week. But each day you choose to pause before reacting, to challenge a limiting thought, to focus on what matters. You are training your mind, and the mind never forgets. It records patterns like a silent witness. It notices when you honor your commitments. It notices when you prioritize growth over comfort. It notices when you keep showing up even when the external world offers no reward. Eventually, these small, consistent efforts change your internal landscape. Your thoughts begin to shift, your perceptions adjust, your beliefs strengthen, and once the mind believes in your ability to grow, your actions follow naturally. This is why consistency is far more valuable than intensity. A short burst of extreme effort is impressive. It may produce temporary results, but it rarely builds sustainable capability. Sustainable capability comes from steady effort, repeated over time. Daily mental training is not about perfection. It's about commitment. It's about showing up even when it's inconvenient, even when it's boring, even when nobody notices, because the mind records every choice, every skipped session, every moment of avoidance, every small victory. And the accumulation of these choices creates identity. I am someone who perseveres. I am someone who faces discomfort. I am someone who can learn from mistakes. Identity is powerful because the mind obeys it. Once a pattern becomes part of your identity, behavior aligns naturally. No debate, no negotiation, no argument. The mind stops resisting growth because it recognizes you as someone capable of it. That is the leverage of daily practice. It is invisible work that compounds. People often say, I need motivation. They wait for a surge of inspiration to start acting. But motivation is fleeting. It is unreliable. It is external. Discipline is internal. It is self-directed. It is the daily act of choosing what matters over what feels good in the moment. Every moment you practice intentional thinking, you are investing in mental resilience. Resilience is not born from avoiding failure. It is born from experiencing challenges and learning to respond instead of react. An untrained mind sees failure as confirmation of limitation. A trained mind sees failure as information. It sees it as a guide, not a verdict. It sees the signal in discomfort. And that perspective is what separates those who plateau from those who continue to grow. Mental training also sharpens clarity. When your mind is cluttered with habitual fear, doubt, and distraction, it struggles to see solutions. It fixates on obstacles. It magnifies small problems. It procrastinates on meaningful action. But when your mind is trained, it filters noise automatically. It recognizes what deserves attention. It evaluates opportunities through a lens of long-term purpose. It aligns decisions with values instead of impulses. That clarity is liberating. It reduces internal conflict. It makes action easier. It strengthens confidence. Confidence, in this sense, is not arrogance. It is the quiet trust that comes from knowing you prepared your mind to face challenges consistently. This is why mental training is not optional. Because without it, external circumstances will dominate your thinking. Your reactions will be dictated by fear, habit, and convenience. You will drift rather than lead. And the world does not pause for indecision. It does not wait for clarity to arrive magically. Opportunities pass. Challenges persist. Life continues. The trained mind sees this and acts differently. It understands that action is the teacher. That repetition is the path. That discomfort is a companion, not an enemy. Each day of mental training, no matter how small, compounds. It strengthens focus. It develops resilience. It deepens self-awareness. It reinforces values. It solidifies identity. And identity is what sustains you when circumstances are uncertain. It is what allows you to lead when others panic. It is what allows you to persist when outcomes are unclear. It is what allows you to remain calm when fear knocks at the door. This is why the most successful people do not rely on talent or luck. They rely on the strength of their minds. They rely on the cumulative effect of daily practice. They rely on consistency when the world is inconsistent. Your mind is your superpower. It is capable of far more than you realize. It can create clarity in chaos. It can produce courage in fear. It can generate resilience in adversity, but it will not do so by accident. It will only do so through intention, through repetition, through daily training. Not tomorrow, not when you feel like it, not when conditions are perfect. Daily. The investment is small in isolation, but over months and years it multiplies. It becomes your edge. It becomes your identity. It becomes the foundation for everything you want to achieve. So the real question is not whether you have the capacity to grow. You do. The real question is whether you will commit to training your mind consistently enough to realize it. Because when you do, the world does not need to change first. You do. And once your mind is trained, your actions, your choices, and your life follow naturally. Your superpower is yours to wield. Every single day, we spend so much of our lives looking outward for change. We look for better circumstances, new opportunities, the right environment, or a sudden spark of inspiration. But the truth is formation rarely comes from the outside. It begins inside. It begins with the mind. Your mind is the control center of your experience. It is the lens through which you interpret every situation, and it is capable of far more than most of us allow it to be, yet most people leave their minds untrained. They leave them at the mercy of old habits, fears, and societal conditioning, and when the world presents a challenge, the untrained mind defaults to reaction, resistance, and retreat. This is not weakness. It is simply the natural tendency of the mind to conserve energy and avoid discomfort. An untrained mind reacts to problems rather than solving them. It interprets setbacks as proof of inadequacy. It magnifies obstacles instead of identifying solutions. And it trusts instinct more than intention. This is why daily mental training is essential. Mental strength is not built in a moment of inspiration. It is built quietly, consistently, day after day. Each time you pause before reacting to a negative thought, you are training your mind. Each time you challenge a limiting belief, you are expanding its capacity. Each time you focus on long-term goals instead of immediate comfort, you are strengthening its discipline. The mind learns through repetition. It forms patterns from what it experiences most often. And once those patterns are established, they guide your behavior automatically. If the patterns are fear-based, reactive, and comfort-seeking, your life will reflect that. If the patterns are courageous, deliberate, and growth-oriented, your life will reflect that instead. Most people underestimate the compounding power of consistent mental training. They look for dramatic shifts, breakthroughs, or sudden inspiration, and when those do not appear, they assume they have failed. But the mind does not operate like that. It is like a muscle. It strengthens with consistent use and weakens with neglect. You do not wake up one morning with perfect focus, clarity, and resilience. You build it, one thought at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time. Every time you choose to act from principle rather than impulse, you are training your mind. Every time you choose curiosity over judgment, you are training your mind. Every time you choose courage over avoidance, you are training your mind. This is why identity matters more than motivation. Motivation is temporary. It rises and falls with mood, circumstances, and energy levels. Identity, however, is persistent. When your mind has learned to see itself as capable, resilient, and disciplined, your behavior aligns naturally. You no longer rely on fleeting motivation to act. You act because it is who you are. And identity is forged through repeated action, not abstract intention. Each small act of discipline is a vote for the person you want to become. Each moment you avoid distraction or fear is a vote for clarity, courage, and strength. Over time, those votes accumulate and they compound until one day you look back and realize that you are no longer the same person who doubted, feared, or hesitated. This is why patience is critical. The untrained mind wants immediate feedback. It wants visible results. It wants proof that effort is worthwhile. But mental growth is invisible at first. You do not feel it. You do not see it. You only notice its effects months or years later. And those who give up too soon never experience the benefits. Daily mental training also strengthens resilience. The mind that is exercised consistently in small, deliberate ways can endure setbacks without panic. It can face uncertainty without paralysis. It can handle criticism without losing confidence. An untrained mind treats adversity as a threat. A trained mind treats adversity as information. It asks, what can I learn? What does this teach me about my assumptions, my approach, or my abilities? It converts obstacles into opportunities for growth. Training your mind is not about eliminating fear, discomfort, or uncertainty. Those are inevitable parts of life. Training your mind is about learning to respond to them differently. It is about seeing fear as a signal, not a stop sign. It is about seeing challenges as invitations, not punishments. It is about choosing meaning over comfort. Daily mental training also builds clarity. A mind that is exercised intentionally can filter noise and focus on what truly matters. It recognizes distractions and resists them. It evaluates opportunities through the lens of long-term purpose. It aligns thoughts and actions with core values. Clarity reduces indecision. It reduces wasted energy. It reduces the internal friction that often leads to procrastination. And once the mind has clarity, action becomes easier. Confidence follows naturally. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It is the result of repeated evidence that you can face challenges, endure discomfort, and persevere. The mind that has been trained daily does not rely on external validation. It does not need constant reassurance. It trusts itself. It knows it can adapt, learn, and overcome. This trust transforms how you experience the world. Challenges become manageable. Setbacks become temporary. Criticism becomes informative. Fear becomes motivating. And the more your mind is trained, the less the world controls you. Because most people live at the mercy of circumstances, emotions, and external events, they react instead of respond. They are carried by waves rather than steering the course. A trained mind reverses that dynamic. It leads instead of reacts. It chooses instead of drifts. It creates instead of simply consumes. This is the